At 95 years old, with a fortune hovering near $400 million, Clint Eastwood does something almost no billionaire does anymore. He drives himself to the gas station and pumps his own fuel. No entourage, no spectacle, just Clint, standing beside a car most people would have traded in decades ago. And that's where the mystery begins. Because this isn't forgetfulness or nostalgia. It's a choice. A 37-year-old car, still in daily rotation, owned by one of the richest and most powerful men in Hollywood history. So, why refuse to upgrade? What does this car say about how Clint Eastwood actually lives? And more importantly, what exactly is the car Clint Eastwood drives at 95? The car he actually drives at 95, so let's answer the question that's been quietly hanging in the air since that gas station moment. It isn't a Ferrari. It isn't a Bentley. It isn't a modern luxury SUV packed with screens and self-driving modes. The car Clint Eastwood actually drives at 95 years old is a 1988 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEC, part of the legendary W126 S-Class line. And once you hear what that car represents, the choice starts to make unsettling sense. Think about the math for a second. The car is 37 years old. Clint Eastwood is 95. That means this Mercedes has been with him for more than a third of his life. Long enough to outlast movie trends, Hollywood eras, studio power shifts, and even the rise and fall of entire car brands. While celebrities around him cycled through supercars like fashion accessories, this one stayed put. Same body, same badge, same quiet presence. Recent sightings confirm it is not a garage queen or sentimental relic rolled out for special occasions. People have seen him driving it himself, pulling into everyday places, stopping for fuel, and handling the routine details of life without an assistant doing it for him. No cameras allowed. No performance. Just usage. And that detail matters more than it sounds. The 500 SEC was not designed to scream wealth. When it was new, it was expensive, but it was built around something different. It was engineered for durability, comfort, and long-term trust. This was Mercedes in an era when engineers were allowed to overbuild, when doors closed with weight, and when longevity was a design goal instead of a marketing slogan. The W126 series earned a reputation for being almost stubbornly reliable. Many are still on the road decades later, not because they are collectible toys, but because they refuse to die. That fits Eastwood in an almost uncomfortable way. At 95, Clint Eastwood has nothing left to prove. He is not auditioning for relevance. He is not signaling status. He has already lived through the stage where wealth needs to be visible. Driving this Mercedes is not about nostalgia. It is about alignment. The car reflects a mindset that values things that work quietly, consistently, and without applause. There's also something deeper hiding here. In a culture where luxury cars are often used as social armor, switching models every few years to signal success, Eastwood's refusal to upgrade feels like a rejection of that entire game. He does not perform well. He does not announce it. He does not translate money into noise. Ask yourself honestly, if you had unlimited money, would you keep the same car for 37 years? Most people would say no without hesitation. New tech, new comfort, new image. But Clint Eastwood already knows something many people learn too late. At a certain point, upgrades stop improving your life. They just add complexity. The 500 SEC already does what he needs it to do. It starts. It drives. It feels solid. It asks for nothing beyond respect and maintenance. And that may be the most revealing detail of all. This car is not about speed, flash, or attention. It is about trust. Eastwood trusts it the way you trust a long-term companion. Quietly, without explanation. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. This Mercedes was not the first time Clint Eastwood surprised people with his choice of a daily driver. Long before this understated German coupe became his constant, he was already signaling something about how he sees cars, fame, and himself. So, what was the surprising car Clint Eastwood drove before this one? And why did it confuse people just as much at the time? The SUV that shocked Jimmy Fallon, and once you realize Clint Eastwood sticks with things he trusts, that late-night television moment suddenly hits different. Back in 2016, Clint Eastwood was sitting comfortably on Jimmy Fallon's couch, relaxed, joking, and completely uninterested in impressing anyone. Fallon, doing what hosts do, steered the conversation toward cars, probably expecting a harmless answer. Maybe a vintage classic, maybe a luxury brand, something safe. Instead, Eastwood casually dropped a detail that made the room pause for half a second longer than usual. He said he drove a GMC Typhoon. Not past tense. Not as a collector's item. He said it the way someone mentions a familiar pair of shoes. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. You can see Fallon's reaction in real time. A mix of confusion and surprise, followed by curiosity. Because the GMC Typhoon does not match the public image people carry of Clint Eastwood. It is not elegant. It is not European. It is not what you expect a Hollywood legend to casually drive daily. And that is exactly why it matters. The Typhoon came out in the early 1990s, during a strange and experimental era in American car design. On the surface, it looked like a compact SUV with blacked-out trim and nothing flashy going on. But underneath, it was something entirely different. GMC had quietly built a performance monster and wrapped it in an unassuming body. This SUV was turbocharged at a time when SUVs were slow, boxy, and built strictly for utility. The Typhoon pushed around 280 horsepower, which does not sound wild today, but in 1992, it was borderline absurd for a truck-based vehicle. Even more shocking was the acceleration. 0 to 60 in around 5 seconds. Faster than many sports cars of the era. Faster than vehicles that cost 2 or 3 times as much. Most people never saw it coming. That is why the Typhoon developed a reputation as a sleeper. From the outside, it looked ordinary. On the road, it embarrassed cars that were supposed to be fast. Ferraris, Corvettes, and flashy imports would line up next to it, assuming an easy win, only to get walked off the line by a square little SUV with a GMC badge. That contrast fits Clint Eastwood almost too perfectly. At the time, he was already an established icon. Oscar winner, director, cultural force. Yet he chose a vehicle that refused to announce itself. A car built for people who cared about what something could do, not what it signaled. The Typhoon was never about status. It was about capability hiding in plain sight. And Eastwood did not hype it. He did not explain it. He did not frame it as a clever choice. He simply drove it. That detail is important because it shows this pattern did not start with the Mercedes. Long before the 1988 500 SEC became his steady companion, Eastwood was already rejecting the idea that cars were tools for image management. He gravitated toward vehicles that did their job quietly, sometimes brutally well, without demanding attention. There's also something generational happening here. Clint Eastwood came up in a time when machines were judged by how they performed over the years, not by how quickly they could be replaced. The Typhoon was built during a brief window when American manufacturers took risks without worrying about focus groups. It existed because someone asked, what if we made an SUV that could outrun sports cars, and then actually followed through? That kind of thinking resonates with someone who spent decades making films his own way, often against trends, often against expectations. So, when people laugh at the idea of Clint Eastwood driving a GMC Typhoon, they miss the deeper point. He was never chasing luxury or flash. He was choosing machines that reflected how he moved through the world. Capable, understated, slightly underestimated. Which brings us to the part most people still do not know. Because the Typhoon was not just a quirky SUV with a turbo. In real-world performance, under the right conditions, it could do something that sounds almost ridiculous today. What if I told you this ordinary SUV could embarrass Ferraris? When practical cars were faster than supercars, yes. The GMC Typhoon could outrun Ferraris off the line. And not in a legend-after-the-fact way. In real traffic. At real stoplights. In moments when nobody was filming and nobody was trying to make a point. Here's what most people never hear. In the early 1990s, the Typhoon packed a turbocharged 4.3-liter V6 pushing about 280 horsepower and, more importantly, a wall of torque that arrived instantly. Pair that with all-wheel drive and a tight automatic transmission, and you had something exotic brands were not prepared for. While Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the era relied on high revs, rear-wheel drive, and perfect launches, The Typhoon simply hooked up and went. No drama. No wheel spin. Just forward motion. 0 to 60 came in roughly 5 seconds. Some tests clocked it even quicker under ideal conditions. That put it in the same conversation as Ferraris costing 3 or 4 times as much. But the real shock was not the numbers on paper. It was how repeatable that performance was. You did not need a racetrack or professional driver. You could be an older guy in casual clothes, rolling up to a light, pressing the pedal, and leaving a bright red supercar scrambling for traction. That's the part that made the Typhoon dangerous to egos. Clint Eastwood was never interested in theoretical performance. He cared about what worked in the real world. Traffic, stoplights, short merges, cold starts, the kind of driving that actually happens in daily life. The Typhoon's turbo torque hit low and hard, exactly where you feel it most. No waiting, no drama, just an instant response. And that detail says a lot about how he thinks. Exotic cars sell a fantasy. They look fast even when parked. They announce wealth before the engine starts. But they often demand compromise. Low ground clearance, unforgiving clutches, constant attention. They perform best when conditions are perfect, and the driver is fully focused on managing them. The Typhoon didn't ask for any of that. It was fast when it mattered, invisible when it didn't. You could load groceries in it, drive it in bad weather, sit higher than traffic, and still outrun cars that were supposed to be untouchable. That combination is rare, even today. Eastwood's choice quietly exposed a truth most car marketing tries to bury. Performance without usability is theater. It looks good on posters and social media, but it rarely improves your actual life. Real performance shows up when nobody is watching. That's why the Typhoon confused people. It broke the visual rules. It looked like something a contractor might drive, not a Hollywood icon. But underneath, it carried serious engineering intent. GMC built it during a brief moment when practicality and performance overlapped without apology. They didn't dress it up. They didn't over-explain it. They just made it brutally effective. And Eastwood noticed. This wasn't about rebellion or irony. It was about honesty. The Typhoon did exactly what it promised and nothing more. No image maintenance required. No explanation needed. If someone